Here we are at ATG HQ. Surya, special guest. Great to see you, brother, visiting from India. You know, it's just a typical gym. We got our treadmills by the window here. You know, of course, at this gym, everyone's going backward on the treadmills. Surya started ATG about 4 years ago. Overcame different problems from knee surgeries. Not just that, he's probably taught more people knee ability in person than I have. He runs seminars in India teaching people. I've seen the success stories from him. It's absolutely incredible. It gives me chills when I read these success stories. He's going to try to spend about 10 minutes teaching you, as if you were at one of his seminars, the 3 things he's found at his seminars, help people to the most breakthroughs. Give us some feedback. He can revamp this every year. He's visiting from India. We got to take advantage of this right now. Roughly 10 minutes, but look, if it's an hour, if it's whatever it is, you just give him, give him your heart. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you again. And first off, it's your birthday right now. And so happy birthday. And thank you so much for being a teacher, a friend, and a mentor to me. You've been a support for 4 years. And we've been on quite a journey. And it's always an absolute pleasure to be here. To be able to share this with the people over here and giving me the opportunity for that, it means the world to me. So thank you so much. Cool. So when I understand ATG, right, I think about it as first about defining it what it is to me, right? And I think of ATG as a full body bulletproofing system. Then the question becomes like, what is bulletproofing? And in my workshops, I tell people that basically bulletproofing is just a gimmicky marketing term. And I think that what we are trying to do here is just a very well-rounded way of approaching fitness, strength training, and we've tried to take very good things from rehabilitation, strength and conditioning, calisthenics, and put that together into a cohesive system. And the problem statement is very important to understand the problem statement we are trying to solve. And the problem statement I think we're trying to solve is a hardware upgrade, a pure hardware upgrade. We're trying to transform the structures, the muscles, joints, connective tissues, and transform them, literally upgrade them so that you can generate or absorb more forces in a certain position. Now, this can help you from getting out of pain and injuries, and also it can give you an edge in performance, and depends on how you take the following principles and go apply it. More than the movements, obviously, we see the movements online. Everyone has seen the movements online. It's all out there. I personally feel that's very, very important to understand the first principles, because if you understand the principles, maybe you get 80% of the answers over here, right, from this system or any system for that matter. But if you don't understand the principles, you only understand the movement, you're always just locked in. But if you understand the principles, maybe you get 80% here, at least you're able to think for yourself and go out there and look for answers yourself, and maybe you find something in a different system. When we look at this thing, like how do we upgrade the structures, why is this different, maybe better, or why has something not worked in the past for you versus why is this going to work? There are 3 principles I want to take home, and these principles are what has set apart this approach for me and why I feel this thing works versus what might have not worked for you. Let's start to go into these principles next. The intent of our practice is to transform the structures. We're literally trying to transform the strength, length, and the quality and the thickness of the tissue so that you can generate more force or absorb more forces in a certain position. So the first principle of how I want you to think about your practice going forward, I call this principle, I call it NIRVANA strength, and it's a term that I borrowed from somewhere, you can say. And what Nirvana strength fundamentally is essentially that I want you to build a strong, wide foundation of pain-free ability, such that you're not in pain and in fact feel good, great, and your joints feel good, great, and nourished about 78% of the time. Why am I not saying 100%? I'm not saying 100% because I'm not the pain-free guy. I want you to live life on the edges. When you're living life on the edges, there is going to be pain, there is going to be fear, failure, death. These are powerful forces, and these are powerful forces for human development. I don't want you to shy away from these things. The idea is to prepare a strong foundation of ability so that when you're putting yourself in these situations, you can actually make the most out of it. To summarize in the context of, say, something like running, I'd rather you not have pain while walking downstairs, but have pain while, say, running maybe a 50K, right? So, but for that, you need to do the preparatory work. And that's the preparatory work that we try to do in the gym in the context of bulletproofing. How do you take this principle of Nirvana strength and apply it into the context of your practice going forward? You have to become a master of regressing a particular movement. So when you're actually working in here in the gym, you're trying to adapt the structures. And when you're trying to adapt the structures, you have to understand that you're not just trying to heal the structures, you're also trying to work on healing the nervous system and the somatic components, which is basically how your body interprets the signals from the signals of pain, and really try to make sure that you're healing it across all these different levels. And that cannot happen if you're pushing through pain. So going forward in your practice, I want you to master the art of regressing a movement to the point you're not having pain or discomfort, or at least it's not getting worse. Ideally, it should be getting better, so that you're able to produce adaptation at a certain level. So you'll be moving very slow at the start in terms of the level that you start with. It can be a little bit humbling, but if you work consistently at that level, your body will give you trust. It'll either allow you a little bit more range, it'll allow a little bit more load, or it'll allow a little bit more stability. And that's when you increase the complexity of the exercise. So it's very, very important to work at a level that is right for you. You should not be looking at what someone else has done on Instagram and something. It's about like, where are you right now in your journey? And from that place, you start to basically weave a path to where you want to go or what you're inspired to go towards, right? And this, we're going to look into this in the form of a very simple exercise, which is the Patrick Step Up. So this is a movement called the Patrick Step Up, and we're working on short range knee extension. We stick our feet slightly turned out, stick this leg out, toes pulled in, and we slowly bend this knee, pause, and then come up, pause. Going slowly, pause, and come up. And you want to look at around something 20 feet ahead. Pause, and then come up. Now, when people come to my workshops, and there are a lot of people I work with who are not comfortable with this movement, and the way you make this movement easier for yourself is to stick this leg in. Now, this seems very simplistic, but you would be surprised how many people are not practicing this in the context of your healing journey. So you bring this leg in, and now you can maybe even do like, say, 100 pulses like this, and you're getting an insane amount of blood flow and adaptation. And this, over time, can unlock more and more range for you. And once your body gets ready, that's when you start to add load. This can also be regressed further, where there are certain people who struggle with the step up, even with a single leg, and I make them go like this, stick, and we do them a double leg step up. So that they don't have to worry about stability. And then once they've done that for a bit, I make them go heavy with the double leg step up so that they're building the tissue there. And then we start to go back to the single leg versions and go on. Personally, I've had 5 knee surgeries and 4 knee surgeries on this knee. My knee would dislocate. So I can assure you this movement did not feel comfortable for me for the longest time. But that is because the adaptation hadn't happened and I had to chip in and do that work, right? When I started, just normal step-ups would irritate my knee. I would get irritation over here and stuff. But right now, without any warm-up, pick around 75% of my body weight. All this means is that in this particular position, I can handle a certain amount of forces. And this is because I've stuck on to the process and I've trusted the fact that if I regress and allow the adaptation to happen over an extended duration of time, it starts to stick eventually and you see the results that you're looking for. Nirvana strength, again, you want to become a master of regressing movements. You have to start from a place of humility and be like, this is where I'm at, as opposed to what you see someone else do and be like, I can do this with minimum discomfort or minimal pain. And from that place, we're going to progress you from there. And as the adaptation happens, as the structures transform, you can start to progress the levels higher and higher up. Cool? That's a key takeaway from principle number 1. Principle number 2 that I want you to take home and think about is this concept of structural balance. Now, structural balance is a concept or a term that was coined by Charles Poliquin, and he is obviously one of the most respected strength and conditioning coaches in terms of pure results. I think he's coached over 800 plus Olympic caliber athletes, and he took this structural balance concept and applied it to improve performance and help his athletes rehabilitate. So today we can take that and apply it into our own lives thanks to teachers like Ben and be like integrated so that we can maybe have less pain, we can go for that run that we want. How do I understand structural balance is simply this. Let's say I can do 100% of my body weight, which is 80 kilos, Romanian deadlift with strict form, but you put a kettlebell on my foot and I'm asking you to do kettlebell raises, I'm not able to go say 4 kgs for 20 reps, right? What that means is that my power generators are basically strong, but the other side of it, the receiving end of it, the ankle flexors, the shock absorbers are not strong enough. So what we are trying to do with structural balance is simply this. I want your feet and ankle to be brutally strong. I want your knees to be brutally strong. I want your hips to be brutally strong. But what I also want is I want those things to be balanced with each other. I want your feet and ankle to be insanely strong, but also structurally balanced with your knees. I want your knees to be insanely strong, but structurally balanced with your hips. Why this is important is the fact that if you're able to generate the power, most strength and conditioning systems, there is a huge emphasis on triple extension, right? The power generators, meaning we're doing our glute bridges, we're trying to get our hips strong using deadlifts and squats and everything, but we don't pay enough attention to the other side of the coin, which is triple flexion. So one of the takeaways of how this is different in terms of rehabilitating your legs is that we are really trying to make sure that we are rebalancing your triple extension, which is extending the hip, extending the knee, and also extending the ankle. These are things we commonly train. We are also trying to rebalance that with flexing the ankle, flexing the knee, and flexing the hip. So this is what it looks like in terms of practice. So here we are working on ankle flexion using a tip bar. It's called the loaded tibialis raise. So you're going to go slowly on the way down, pause, and then come up and squeeze at the top. Slowly on the way down, pause, come up and squeeze at the top. So here we are working the muscles over here, your tibialis, and the connective tissue over here. So these are responsible essentially to flex the ankle, and these are one of the decelerators of the foot. And we want them to be insanely strong, right? The strongest they've ever been. What's interesting is that if you've ever had an ankle or a knee injury or a surgery, the first thing they make you do after a knee surgery is they make you sit and they make you do shit ton of ankle circles. And they make you do flexing and extending the ankle. The reason is they want to work the joint below the knee. But after that, we pretty much forget about it. Here, what we've taken is, hey, that's something that's good that we did there. How about we take that and become insanely strong at it? The same thing is after you've had a major knee surgery, within like literally 4 hours of it, they'll make you do straight leg raises. Why? They're trying to strengthen your hips and work at the joints above the knee. And again, we do this for a few weeks, and the moment we can start to walk again, we forget about it. But here, we're going to continue to train it. And the way we do it is, all we need is really a kettlebell. Make sure this knee is locked, looking straight ahead. Lift up and come down. Lift up and come down. Lift up, come down. So you're working on the hip flexors, right? The muscles over here. And again, we already looked into knee extension with a movement like the step up, and we do ton of knee extension work using Bulgarian split squats, and all these movements, but you want to make sure that the back of the knee, your knee flexors, your hamstrings, and also the connective tissue in the back of the knee are also insanely strong, right? And here we're just taking a very simple movement, such as the hamstring bridge raises to demo that. Toes pulled in, hands up in the air, pause, slowly come down. Pause, slowly come down. Make sure you're driving that heel down so that you're firing up the hamstrings. Slowly come down. And again, if you're getting stronger at this, then we can progress to single leg work. Obviously, we saw these movements at a reasonably beginner level, but the idea is to eventually get insanely strong. So if you take something like the hamstring bridge raises, you start with the double leg, and then we progress on to the single leg, and we get on something like a hamstring curl machine and like work on seated and lying, single leg, double leg, both of these things. And eventually, when your tissues are ready, we go for something which is something like the Nordic curl to get that connective tissue dominance aspect, which will be the third principle that we cover, right? What's really important to understand with the structural balance thing is we are using this in a rehab context, this principle, or to get you out of pain, but we want you to be insanely strong at these movements, but also very well balanced. So how this looks is that if I were to coach you, what I would do is that let's say you can do 100% of your body weight on Romanian deadlift, but you can not do 10% of your body weight on a tibialis raise, right? You're not that strong in the tibialis raise according to the structural balance numbers. I'm going to basically make you train Romanian deadlifts maybe once every 2 weeks, but I'll make you train Tibialis 3 to 4 times a week because that's the quickest way for me to get you back to structural balance. Usually what happens is if someone is strong as push-ups, they keep training the push-ups. But the way we are thinking about it from an upper body perspective is that if you're strong at push-ups and you can do 20 push-ups, but you cannot do a single pull-up, I would make you maintain your push-ups, maybe training only once a week, but I'll actually put all the energy into getting you your first pull-up because you are going to be more structurally balanced. And if you're more structurally balanced, that means the amount of force you can generate can be matched by the amount of forces you can absorb. The opposing joint, the other side, can handle it, and also that can give you an edge in performance because if you can, the body trusts you more, right? Your nervous system trusts you more that, hey, I have the power to jump, but the decelerators, if they're not ready, the body knows and it will hold you back from jumping high. So it can help you get out of pain, but it can also give you that edge in performance. So to summarize structural balance, you're going to take away 3 things, right? One is that you want to be insanely strong, but also balanced, meaning I want your left to be balanced with the right. I want your feet and ankle to be balanced with the knee and balanced with the hip, right? I want the front to be balanced with the back, right? So we are trying to rebalance these things, and having numbers to chase is a very, very important thing. So think structural balance, 0 weak links. I want you to have numbers. If you hit a particular number, you maintain it. And again, you're against taking these things that we also do in rehab, and you're trying to really take it towards performance. So we're going to cover the final principle, which is basically connective tissue dominance. And this is the bulletproofing stuff you see on Instagram. So let's try to understand this. So I would argue this is a reasonably good lunge. The position is good, torso upright, your knee is in line with your heel, shin vertical. And this is a good position with the lunge. And there's nothing wrong with this movement, but we are generally told not to take the knee over the toe. And this is what a lunge generally looks like. Now let's compare it to this movement. This is a movement which is the ATG split squat, right? So here, you see the angle over here. So the knee is largely in a muscle dominant position. The ankle is pretty much doing nothing, right? So your ankle is pretty much doing nothing. There's no ankle loading over here in terms of the mobility, and your back hip is somewhat stretched. But we get into the ATG split squat, you look at this front ankle stabilizing at its end range. You see this knee, there's a lot of forces going through this knee, and you see this back hip over here is in a completely stretched position, right? So this is essentially a connective tissue dominant movement, whereas this is a muscle dominant movement. The reason people tell you not to take your knee over the toe is essentially because it loads the joint and it puts stress on the joints. But the way you build joints is the same way you build muscles, which is by loading it and not avoiding it, right? And that's precisely why they tell you not to take the knee over the toe, because they're like, let's keep the focus on the muscles. But if you don't work on building your joints, right, then what happens is that you're developing an imbalance as the muscle to joint ratio. So meaning if I'm doing a lunge like this, and essentially I'm getting the tissues over here stronger and stronger, but I'm not affecting the strict tissues over here, the muscles have the ability to generate the force, but the joints are not able to handle it. So you're getting an imbalance at the muscle to joint ratio, right? And this is one of the things we are trying to rebalance. So it's really important to understand that it takes 3 to 5 times longer to build your connective tissue as opposed to your muscles, right? So if you wanted to transform your muscles, I can put you on a 3-month program. You can get your muscles buffed, you can get your fat loss, and you're done. But if you're trying to transform the structures inside the joint, you're looking at more of a maybe like a 15-month process over 3 to 5 months process, right? And this is very important to understand because people rush a lot through when they're working these connective tissue dominant movements. It's extremely important to work at a very precise level because you're trying to affect structures which are very sensitive. But if you know what you're doing, the benefits that you get far, far outweigh the risks that you may perceive to have, right? We're going to look into that for a little bit. The ATG split squats is a connective tissue dominant movement. So I want you to progress this extremely slowly. There's a difference between how you approach muscle dominant movements and connective tissue dominant movements. So you have to take it extremely slow over here. So when I'm conducting a workshop or I'm working with anyone, maybe for the first few weeks, if I feel they're not ready, I don't even make them attempt a split squats, right? You're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to create structural change in your body so that once you hit the save button, you don't have to look back. So if I'm introducing the split squat to someone, I make sure that I at least have a 1.5 to 2 foot elevation, and then make sure there is a nice support over here. You keep this leg in front, make sure that your feet are staggered, adjust, and then from here, you're going to sink down till you get coverage, get a nice pause, and then come up. And if you need to adjust the feet or something, that's fine. Torso upright, taking as much support as you want over here, and then coming up. So I'm taking all the support over here. I'm just guiding into that position. It should feel good, nourishing for your joints. I don't want you to experience any pain. So a good indicator for this style of training or any style of training is that you want your joints and muscles in your body to feel good, or at least not for worse during that session, immediately after that session, a few hours after that session, and the next day. If you're hitting all these check boxes, that's a net positive experience you've had, and that's a net positive session. And you take that session as a reference point, and then you just try to increase a little bit of difficulty on that from your next session. And if you progress like that from where you are, you'll end up pretty okay. The magic recipe is basically not this movement, right? This now out on Instagram, everyone has access to it. But the magic recipe is, how do you create a journey for someone so that you're able to unlock this ability for them? And I'll take this analogy for you to understand, right? I call it the clay pot analogy. So let's say you are a clay pot with some cracks on it. And this is not how clay pots are fixed, but we're just using this as an analogy, is that you're a clay pot with some cracks on it and you're trying to fix it. So you put it on the potter's wheel and you start to spin it so that it's nice and warm, right? And when it's nice and warm, take a fresh lump of thick clay and start to pack it around those cracks, right? Take a fresh lump of thick clay, pack it around the cracks. And when the time is right and there is enough clay there and it's nice and warm, you put your hands there and you start to shape it, right? You put your hands there, carefully shape it, and then you step away from it all and let it settle. And then if you need to go in again and repeat the process, you repeat the process. And I'm not saying clay pots are made this way, but it's a good analogy to think about. And this bulletproofing journey looks a lot like that. So when you're doing a movement like the sled, you're getting an insane amount of blood flow and muscle activation and really warming up the structures in your entire lower body, right? That's what the sled is for. And then after that, when you do a movement like the step up, essentially, we are taking a fresh lump of clay and packing it over here. When I'm making you do hamstring work, I'm taking a fresh lump of clay and packing it at the back of the knee. Fresh lump of clay here. So I'm packing all this tissue around the joint. And then finally, when I do movements like the split squats and Nordic curls, the connective tissue dominant stuff, it's almost like we're starting to put our hands there and shape it. And the reason this is important is that if the clay pot is too brittle, meaning that it's just dry and brittle, and you start to poke your hands over there, you can develop a new crack, right? Or if it's warm but there's not enough clay, then you put your hands there, you might just rip a new hole in it. And this is why these joint dominant exercises get a bad rep, because when it is introduced in someone's journey is often too soon, or the preparatory work hasn't been done. So if you understand how to basically sequence, like for example, there are people that introduce split squats only a year of actually adaptation setting in with all these other movements. So I make sure there's like a thick lump of tissue there to work with before I even introduce split squats for them, right? So when this is brought in, these movements are brought in, is very important. When you take these three principles, number one, nirvana strength, that you're going to master regressing a movement and working at a level that is safe for you, that you're ready for, and allow the adaptation to happen there before you progress. Principle number two, structural balance, that you're going to trying to get insanely strong, pain-free, but you're also making sure all these joints are balanced with each other, and also your power generators are balanced out with the shock absorbers, and making sure that they are structurally balanced, meaning that the numbers are matching up. And principle number three, connective tissue dominance, where you're also not just training the muscles, you're also loading the joints, and it's by loading the end ranges that you build strong, resilient joints. When you take these three principles and you apply it into someone's journey, they're still going to the gym or working out at home, getting their 3 to 5 workouts a week, and basically maybe like anywhere from 30 to 75 minutes. But because the intent of the practice is very different, the results that you see are very different. So what I think is that what Ben's done for me, and the way I think about it, this is just, I'm saying this with great humility, is just maybe a well-rounded way of approaching fitness, right? And it's just that it's in first principles of how the body is designed to move, how you can upgrade the structures so that you can either, if you're in pain, you can come out of pain and have a general sense of health and well-being. If you keep upping the numbers, you have a certain level of fitness and ability. If you keep progressing down that path, now you're starting to think that, okay, you're an athlete now. You can think in season versus off season. And then it's about, can I give you an edge in performance? So this whole spectrum of going from rehab to general health and well-being to fitness to some kind of back to your sport, and then to be like elite performance, essentially there is a connecting thread, and the connecting thread is these three principles and these movements, right? What happens a lot of times is that we have a bunch of things we learned in rehab, but as soon as we get a little bit better, we pick a different system or go to someone else to get us fit. And then we want to go to learn running or something, then we go to a running coach. And what happens every time is that ball's being dropped, meaning that something you learned good in rehab, you lose that when you're actually like trying to push for performance. Here, we take these same movements and there's a natural progression from working at a level that is accessible to you to being insanely strong at it to get you that edge in performance. So again, this is a full body bulletproofing system and an approach. The principles and the movements tie these things together. And I would like you to think about things more from a long-term perspective instead of thinking that I'm going to fix my knees and my lower body or my legs in like say the next 6 weeks or even 6 months. Think about things that, hey, I'm trying to take care of my body and my joints for the rest of my life. I'm trying to upgrade the tissues. I'm here to transform the structure so that I can generate more force, absorb more force, and I want to push myself out there. And as I go on this journey, there is a certain part work I need to do to prepare myself. And that work happens in the gym or at home. And I am taking this craftsmanship approach to chip away at these things over an extended period of time and being like, this is where I am, that's what I'm going to do. And I just chip away at it as a craftsman. If you have that kind of a mindset of being like, I can produce adaptation if I worked on it. And if I worked on things long enough, the adaptation happens and I'm patient enough, then it happens. I want to close off by sharing a personal story. So I was here a couple of years ago and I had been practicing ATG for a couple of years and I could see the sense that this was working, and obviously you have enough inspiration within the community and with Ben. And essentially when I came here, there was a little bit of a dilemma because I hadn't seen that clear breakthrough that I was looking for. Like, it's working, but I'm not there yet, right? And I came here and actually Ben was extremely gracious with his time. And after we had the expo and everything done and I stayed on for a few more days after, he invited me to watch how he shot one of his videos. And this is a powerful moment for me where I went to watch Ben, Brendan and Celia do a video, and they were doing a video on sprinting and they were trying to tie it back to ATG. And essentially they warmed up and everything. And after that, basically the idea was that Ben was shooting a video where Celia, who's Ben's mother, and she was 67 or 68 at the time, she was supposed to like sprint down. So Ben had the camera set up and essentially Celia sprinted down in front of me around 30 meters, right? And here's the crazy stuff that happened. And Ben basically said to her that, hey, listen, which is absolutely incredible to begin with. Ben told her that, hey, I don't think I got the camera angle right. Can you take a few minutes of rest and do this again? And Celia said, no, I'm ready to go right now. And this is a day where I personally wasn't feeling very comfortable running, right? And it was just locked in that how can I give up right now? Like, this is like someone who's 68 is able to sprint, not even sprint once, like be able to sprint back again. And that was very, very inspiring for me. After that, I went to Seattle and I had my own breakthrough moment from 2014 to 22. I've had 4 knee surgeries, MCL tears, dislocations, all this jazz. And 22 is when I was here and I was hiking in Seattle, where I hiked up this thing with one of my best friends. And on the way down, I suddenly felt that, hey, I think I can run now. And basically that entire trail, I ran like no issues with my knee, no issues with my joint, and something I hadn't done in 8 years. And I can tell you how much I suffered in those 8 years. I was not one of those cool people who could just brush out my pain. I literally held up a lot of my aspects of my life to get to where I am right now. And I was pretty much a very sore loser in terms of like, why am I not able to do these things? Why is this happening to me? But the reason I'm sharing this with you is that it took me 8 years to basically run pain-free for the first time, right? Without that stabbing pain and everything, 8 years. And those were very heavy, intense, dark 8 years. And I'm not going to shy away from that. But the moment that happened, all that pain and suffering for those 8 years basically became a breath, and it just like washed away, right? It's not that I've not had things that I've not worked on since, or issues, not had issues since, but all those 8 years that I suffered basically just became a breath, and I was able to move on. The reason I'm sharing this is that on the key part of the healing journey is the fact realizing that you're trying to rebuild trust with your body, with your soul, something deeper. And essentially, if you keep pushing on with an agenda, maybe you never get that win and it's too heavy. But if you kind of like trust and you work at the speed of trust and you are patient enough, maybe that moment surprises you and you get that moment. And when you have that moment, there is no looking back after that, and you can just like go keep moving forward. So I would highly encourage anyone who is having pain or injuries to first really slow down, right? Work at the level that you're at, and then try to like reach for where you're trying to go and take a very slow, patient approach. This is something I had to cultivate, and this is something that Ben has also taught me by actually the way he's approached his journey as well. And remember that Ben has been doing this stuff for like 12 years, and even in a few years into ATG, his knee couldn't bend completely because of all the damage, right? And now you can see what he can do. So I would highly encourage everyone to take a very patient, strategic approach, like a craftsmanship approach. And if you did that, you have an extremely potent toolkit, you have extremely potent principles, and you have a huge ton of coaches all around the world. And if you need to contact me, my Instagram is Phoenix Connections. Here to support you on your journey. If there's any help you need, please do let me know. And thank you so much for your time and for listening.